Let's go into segment 3, and Ben's going to take us into this one.
All right, so this is kind of along similar lines to the last one, but we have U.S. Catholic bishops worry about abortion views in the pews. And this is an article by AP News by Peter Smith on November 17th, 2022. And this was an interesting one. So sounds like they had a bunch of Catholic bishops meeting up to talk about what do we support in Catholicism. And one of their biggest points of concern was the abortion issue, because as we know, with the massive controversy with Roe v. Wade across the country, a lot of the younger generation has said, no, we actually like bodily autonomy. And I have to say, I love Gen Z, and I love the people that have finally said we're done with the Catholic Church and their bullshit. Like, for granted, like a lot of them are still religious and wanting to partake in these church activities, but this is helping us out in ways that people are now questioning authority and demanding explanations for these policies. Like, there were times when the Catholic Church was able to just say, yeah, this is what God says, so do it. And if you don't do it my way, you're going to hell. And now people are saying, hold on a sec. What if that's not true? And I really like seeing the Catholic Church having to backpedal now and finally be forced to explore the reasons why their manipulative tactics are failing.
Yeah, Kelley.
Yeah, what I see here is the last gasps of a dying animal. There's really quite a bit to unpack in this article. There's a lot of information. To start with, was it just me, or did anyone think it was weird that the only Black bishop in the room is like right in the centerpiece of the accompanying photo? I mean, I looked around the rest of that room and he seemed like to be the only one there. It was sort of like they were trying to prove that they had one Black friend, you know? It kind of really bothered me seeing that photo. And maybe it's just me. But one of the things that really bothers me about this is the idea that the church is like infallible, unless, of course, it's about social issues that if I'm a conservative bishop, I don't personally like the idea of, then the church isn't infallible anymore, right? There's been a movement by conservative bishops in the United States farther and farther to the right for quite some time now. A lot of it is not quite in line with our more liberal Pope now, and some American bishops have even have spoken outright against him. They even elected a conservative culture warrior to head to become the president of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. I'm sorry, I got a little tongue-tied there. His name was Timothy Broglio. And he's from the Archdiocese of the Military Services, because there's nothing better than a warrior for Jesus to lead us, right? Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition. So that was the first thing that bothered me. There's a lot more in the article to unpack, but Richard, I don't want to go too far before I let you have a voice. So,
you know what? You just made me laugh, because as soon as you said that, I thought back to those advertisements that pop up on social media every so often of the Jesus t-shirts with the kind of the Holy Knight and with the sword held aloft and warrior for Jesus written down the t-shirt in big, like, horrible font, and imagining that people actually do buy these things. And I think that's great. I think look, this article, I think it's a funny article in a way, because it's got the line running through of the conference, but it touches on lots of different little kind of parts of Catholicism, which I'm sure we'll get to in due course, but it's not just one stance on one thing. But I think the main thing that stood out when I first started reading this article for me was that it's a contrast to the last article. Whereas Mormonism was bending over backwards to try and improve its public image, the Catholic Church seems to always be going in the other direction. And it seems to be trying as hard as it can to put as many people off joining as possible. And this article is a good example of that, because it's telling us, you know, the Catholic Church are telling us themselves that their followers don't agree with their stance on this. And I think that is amazing. The fact that in the light of that, they're still sticking with it. And they're saying that, you know, we don't care what you in the pews think. We're not bothered about what your opinion is. This is what we're saying is the truth. And it's kind of the exact opposite of what we were talking about before, when religions kind of take a step in the right direction. You know, and the Catholic Church on this have even gone so far, as to deny communion to the Catholic House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi. And the reason they've denied communion to her was that she supports abortion rights. And, you know, there just seems to be no end to their stubbornness. You know, the Catholic Church still thinks it's above the law when it comes to abuse victims. As a small group of survivors of sexual abuse held a news conference outside the Baltimore Marriott waterfront where the bishops were meeting. And they wanted to call for bishops to list credible abusers and to stop lobbying against state legislation that would extend statutes of limitations for abuse lawsuits. So the Catholic Church, it just does not seem to care whatsoever what anybody thinks other than itself. Ben.
Yeah, I noticed that as well, and it's very interesting because that particular like denial of communion to Nancy Pelosi is like there, and I know that the Catholic Church does stratify their sins in different tiers, like Protestant Christianity, and I don't know about Mormonism, like with the last article, but some branches of Christianity will say, well, all of these sins are equal. So at least for those churches, it's a bit easier to pick on for this particular thing. So I know the Catholic Church prioritizes certain types of sin, but even so, if you're going to make this power play, this PR stunt of saying, well, I don't approve of your support of abortion rights, so I'm going to deny you specifically communion, when they haven't done that for people that have committed other sins, like talking about the abuse within the church community itself. Why are they not denying communion to the abusers? Why are they not denying communion to people who get divorces or people who exhibit other types of sinful activity? Why does it seem to be that this is limited to whatever public issue is at the forefront? And this is where we see them as well saying, this is my stance on a political issue, and I'm making this I'm going to threaten a politician and say, you don't get communion, and then by extension, you don't get the afterlife. Like, you are committing to purgatory or whatever because you are stuck in this view, and I don't agree with it. So it's definitely manipulative, and it's very abusive, kind of in the same way that the Catholic Church is abusive in a lot of other areas as well.
Yeah, Kelley.
Yeah, I was going to agree that you're right there. They're not asking all the rest of the parishioners what their stance is on abortion before they give them communion, right? They're just picking these high-profile politicians because they're making a political statement. And this isn't the first time they've done it. It goes back to John Kerry, who was running for president against George Bush. They denied him communion too for the same reason. Right. So this is a tactic that these conservative bishops in the U.S. have been doing for quite some time. There are a lot of members. I don't want to condemn the whole Catholic Church for some of these guys. There are members of the church that have really gone far to the right. There was a priest here just south of me in Wisconsin that was removed from the church because he just went full MAGA, full crazy Trump MAGA, and they actually removed him. There was also another bishop who had gone a little too conservative, and the Pope called him to Rome and gave him a job in Rome instead. So he wasn't out in the public here in the U.S. spouting his crazy conservative stuff. So the church has taken it at least a few steps against some of the people who have gone a little too far, which I think is a good thing. But Yeah, I don't think they've ever done enough. And one of the things that I was there was a couple of things that I was really on board with when they were discussing what to do to move to the future. Again, I'm getting tongue tied. I'm really having a hard time tonight. Um, and those were civil discourse and protecting the environment. And I think most of us can get on board with those, right? And the Catholic Church actually does have a fairly short but supportive history of environmentalism. So I was happy to learn that because I didn't realize it. And hopefully they can change the minds of some of their more conservative members of their parishes while they're reaching out to some of the, because they are reaching out to the more liberal members of the church about the horror of abortion, right? So maybe they could use that same messaging to do some other things that are for the better. I do know that there was a Pew Research poll published in May 2022 that says 56% of all U.S. Catholics favor legal abortion. It's even mentioned in the article that the bishops were concerned the parishioners weren't reading the document they published with their views on these subjects. So that kind of points out to what Richard was saying too, that they're not getting through to the people who are sitting in the pews because those people are changing their ideas socially, right? Richard, you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one, isn't it? It's I think I don't know. I think when this is kind of, like I said earlier, the opposite of the Mormon article for me, and I think sometimes I think a lot of the time, as we said in that article, I think when social attitudes are changing, it won't hurt a religious organization to take on board those attitudes. And I think the one thing we've not touched upon in this, which is I think the most important aspect of it, is it's not just a case of social attitudes. It's not just a case of, as our religious friends would like to say, subjective morality and just changing your mind and doing what you feel like. This is a case of what the science says. And that's that, and the Catholic Church, and I'm going to be nice to them. You know, I'm going to follow Kelley a little bit and be nice to them and defend them a little bit here. When it comes to science, usually they're quite good with it. You know, they don't oppose it. They were, you know, it was a Catholic priest who kind of was one of the first people to come up with the idea of Big Bang cosmology and put that forward. And they're not opposed to science, it seems, in general, until it comes to morality, what they consider morality. And I think that's where they need to change the stance, because I think that and I'm going to pass over to Ben so he can talk about the actual science rather than me just rambling on about general science headline kind of type things. But I think the science is quite clear on abortion, and you know the stance of that and what should be done and what is the actual right thing to do outside of some kind of religious belief. But Ben, do you want to talk about the actual science of abortion for a little bit and in this
I mean,
context?
that would take a super, super long conversation. But I mean, it all comes down to people who are not responsible for patients, or people who are not the patients themselves, should not be making medical decisions for anybody else. You cannot interfere with anybody else's medical care. And it is extremely problematic when you say, this is how I would handle an issue, when you have no idea what the core of the issue is. And once you blur the lines between you can't do this for a medical reason, it becomes more and more dangerous to manage a patient who might have an emergency. Let's say somebody who has an ectopic pregnancy or an inevitable abortion or a septic abortion, any of those possibilities. And you blur those lines enough, and now doctors cannot practice the evidence-based medicine, and they cannot do the best thing to preserve whatever the goal is for that patient. If the patient says, I would rather you save me than save the fetus, that is a reasonable goal to pursue. So I think once you start meddling in someone else's medical care, it's dangerous for everybody involved. And so even if you have religious convictions and thoughts about whether or not you personally would do it, it does not matter, because you should not be meddling in that responsibility if you yourself are not part of that equation.
Yeah, I'd kind of like your opinion on this, because this is something we touched upon in one of the earlier articles, and what you know is, does the Catholic Church have the right to say to their own members, abortion, we think abortion is a sin, so therefore, we're going to stop you taking communion if you have that stance?
I think it's manipulative, and they probably shouldn't. But that's also my bias in thinking that their religion isn't true. But if a religious organization wanted to come out and say, "Hey, we don't approve of you taking this action," and someone of that religion says, "I don't want to take this action for myself," that again enters into bodily autonomy for them. And so the same way that I don't think you should make decisions for me, I shouldn't make decisions for you. And if you want to use that as a reason, whether or not it's a good reason, if you want to use that as a reason to make your own medical decision, then I will support you in the best way I can. And then I will hope that you are safe in the way that you do that, and that you have appropriate medical care while you take that. But yeah, the manipulation thing is, I don't think it's ethical, but that's another debate entirely.
Yeah, Kelley, so to stop this becoming the Richard and Ben show, we've been talking for quite a while. Do you want to jump in?
Going back to something that you mentioned earlier, that there was a counter protest by the Survivors Network of those abused by priests, which I think would be SNAP, which I thought was a weird abbreviation. But their Maryland director, David Lorenz, called on all the bishops to be more openly transparent. And the one archbishop that wasn't transparent at all was Brolio, the new president, which I found interesting, very, very interesting. And another thing that I found really weird about that was his diocese was the military. Is he trying to hide sexual abuse in the military? I don't know. I really don't know. But I would hope not. I would really, really hope not.
Yeah,
Go
on.
Go ahead. I was about to say something. I saw that you had mentioned something in your notes to round off the end of the meeting, but
I just wanted to bring it back. I don't want to, we'll come.
Yeah, I don't want to push you into anything.
I want to. I want to, as I said earlier, there was a thread throughout this article of the Bishops' Conference, but it touched on more than one subject. And, most of the subjects that we talked about have been quite heavy and quite serious subjects. But there was, and I'm not suggesting this isn't serious, but it just seemed out of place to me. And that's the fact that, we know Catholics wouldn't be Catholics without making somebody a saint. And this article tells us that the bishops have voted for 3 American women to be considered as saints. One who died of cancer and remained faithful, one who reported mystical experiences, and one who spread the word to African Americans. So I want to break this down a little bit. I didn't want to leave the article without talking about this. So we had one who didn't question God when he didn't intervene at her time of great suffering. So she was worthy of a prize. One who had delusions, or lied, or both. She was worthy of a prize. And one who used charity as a smokescreen to make more Catholics. Worthy of the prize? Check. And their rewards? What are these great prizes that they're going to get for this? Sainthood after the dead, when they can't even enjoy it. And I just found that, I found it firstly bizarre that it was tapped onto this article whatsoever, because it just didn't seem to kind of make any sense in context of the rest of the article. But I found it just a bit bizarre anyway, that this whole idea of sainthood, the lady who endured great suffering and not lost her faith, like that was some kind of great thing for the Catholic Church, so they could make her a saint for that. I just found that really bizarre. I just wanted your two's opinions on that little bit of the article.
But I
Go
mean,
on,
a
Ben.
lot of people die of cancer and remain Catholics. Are you going to sanctify all of them? Because there's more than just her.
Yeah. She must have been really faithful.
Really special.
Really, really faithful.
Well-
Like happy to suffer. No, not just suffering, but happy to suffer. Thank you, God, for him giving me this suffering so that I can become even more faithful to you because of it. Kelley.
I was thinking there are innumerable Catholic saints. What's wrong with having another innumerable more? That's a hard thing to say. But
Yeah.
I mean, I thought that was kind of weird too, that they did have all these heavy subjects, and then, hey, let's just end the meeting on a lighthearted thing of making people saints, right?
Yeah, I'm sure it's not lighthearted to the Catholics. Okay, so overall, you know, let's have a final thought on the article. We'll start with Kelley.
Final thought is good example of the Catholic Church still trying to enforce its medieval ideals on a progressive society, one that's leaving it behind. And I think they really need to get their shit together, you know, and look at what's happening around them. They are bleeding people from the pews, and maybe it'll smarten them up.
Yeah, Ben.
Yeah, my thoughts are to everybody that's providing resistance against this, it's working. It might not be working super quickly. We might not be seeing a lot of progress at once, but the fact that they've had to have meetings to question their stance on this and think about, hey, we're being ruined by this younger generation of people. Good. They should have to think about that. And I don't want any of you going into a voting booth and thinking that you don't have influence, because you do. We are making some waves, and you are causing people to reconsider their ideology. So power to you, especially Gen Z. I love Gen Z. I said that already. Gen Z, you're going to do some fantastic things for this world. Don't you ever stop.